My fellow Americans,
let's talk about the situation at the border. We've seen a huge surge in migrants crossing the border since January. The number of children in custody higher than it was than its 2019 peak during the Trump administration. Your colleague Veronica Escobar of Texas called the conditions there unacceptable. She was there on Friday. Is she right? What more must be done?
Actually, the facts are these. There are more children, about 600-700 more children, unaccompanied children, coming over the border. This is a humanitarian challenge to all of us. What the administration has inherited is a broken system at the border, and they are working to correct that in the children's interest. I'm so pleased that the president, as a temporary measure, has sent FEMA to the border in order to help facilitate the children going from one 72-hour issue into where they are cared for as they are transferred into family homes or homes that are safe for them to be.
And I have to confess, I knew nothing about their suffering until 2021 when I volunteered to help the Biden administration with the crisis at the southern border. As part of Operation Artemis, I was deployed to the Pomona Fairplex Emergency Intake Site in California to help HHS, Office of Refugee Resettlement, reunite children with sponsors in the United States. I thought I was going to help place children in loving homes. Instead, I discovered that children are being trafficked through a sophisticated network that begins with recruiting in home country, smuggling to the U.S. border, and ends when ORR delivers a child to a sponsor. Some sponsors are criminals and traffickers and members of transnational criminal organizations. Some sponsors view children as commodities and assets to be used for earning income. This is why we are witnessing an explosion of labor trafficking. Now, whether it's intentional or not, it could be argued that the United States government has become the middleman in a large-scale, multi-billion-dollar child trafficking operation that is run by bad actors seeking to profit off of the lives of children.
Russia said once they take Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next. Those are NATO countries. That puts America at war. This is about preventing war. It's always been about preventing war. My husband is a combat veteran. He's deployed now. The last thing I want him or any of his military brothers and sisters to do is to go to war.
But I think it is time to give the Ukrainians more help hitting these bases inside Russia.
One of the reasons that the administration has hesitated is because they believe it will escalate things even further with Russia pull the U.S. further in. Why not? Why? So why do you think that's a good idea?
because it's Russia that has escalated this war. Russia has learned how to pull its forces back out of the range where we have allowed Ukraine to use our weapons and get our support.
American media outlets have spoken to scores of people from Ukraine, and they've done scores of interviews with Ukrainian President Zelensky. We ourselves have put in a request for an interview with Zelensky, and we hope he accepts. But the interviews he's already done in the United States are not traditional interviews. They are fawning pep sessions specifically designed to amplify Zelensky's demand that the U.S. enter more deeply into a war in Eastern Europe and pay for it. That is not journalism. It is government propaganda. Propaganda of the ugliest kind, the kind that kills people. At the same time, our politicians and media outlets have been doing this, promoting a foreign leader like he's a new consumer brand. Not a single Western journalist has bothered to interview the president of the other country involved in this conflict, Vladimir Putin. Most Americans have no idea why Putin invaded Ukraine or what his goals are now. They've never heard his voice. That's wrong. Americans have a right to know all they can about a war they're implicated in, and we have the right to tell them about it because we are Americans too.
The idea that we're going to send in offensive equipment and have planes and tanks and trains going in with American pilots and American crews, just understand, and don't kid yourself, no matter what you all say, that's called World War III.
A U.S. official has confirmed to CBS News President Biden has given authorization for Kyiv to use U.S.-supplied long-range weapons to strike deep into Russian territory.
Sitting here with my father, I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction. I am sitting here waiting for the call with my father. Sounds like a shakedown, doesn't it, Director?
I'm not going to get into commenting with that.
You seem deeply uncurious about it, don't you? Almost suspiciously uncurious. Are you protecting the Bidens?
Absolutely not. The FBI does not and has no interest in
You won't answer the question about whether or not that's a shakedown, and everybody knows why you won't answer it. Because to the millions of people who will see this, they know it is. And your inability to acknowledge that is deeply revealing about you.
British police came into the embassy and arrested.
After a long flight from the UK, Julian Assange's day began on the island of Saipan, a tiny territory chosen because it's the closest US court to Australia. This normally quiet courthouse, swarming with reporters, as the WikiLeaks founder arrived flanked by former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd.
individual used an AR-15 in order to act out his assassination attempt. An AR-15 has a range of about 400 to 600 yards. My question, why is the Secret Service protective perimeter shorter than one of the most popular semi-automatic weapons in the United States?
There are a number of weapons out there with a number of ranges. Again, an advance was completed. The determination of the perimeter, I'm not going to speak to specifics, but there are a number of factors that are taken into account when we determine our perimeter. Some of it has to do with terrain, some of it has to do with buildings, some of it has to do with assets and resources that are available.
What I'm hearing is that a perimeter was not established outdoors in an outdoor venue that would prevent an AR-15, which is one of the most common weapons used in mass shootings, from being able to be within the range of Secret Service protection.
Have you provided all audio and video recordings in your possession to this committee, as we asked on July 15th, yes or no?
I would have to get back to you.
That is a no. You're full of shit today. You're just being completely dishonest.
So what is the threat to democracy? People on both sides, people in power, saying out loud that they want to control what you get to hear and see. It is real, it is a threat, and it is happening and growing. And I'll tell you what, punishing thought is on the agenda. And I just heard it from someone who's not a kook, not Alex Jones, not Tucker Carlson, one of the most sober and intelligent politicians of our time, Hillary Rodham Clinton.
I think it's important to indict the Russians, just as Mueller indicted a lot of Russians who were engaged in direct election interference and boosting Trump back in 2016. But I also think there are Americans who are engaged in this kind of propaganda. And whether they should be civilly or even in some cases criminally charged is something that would be a better deterrent.
Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg admitted that the Biden administration repeatedly pressured Meta to censor content, including information about Hunter Biden, and Zuck admitted that he also regrets complying with these demands. In a letter to the House Judiciary Committee Chairman, Representative Jim Jordan, Zuck writes, quote, "The FBI warned us about a potential Russian disinformation operation about the Biden family and Burisma in the lead up to the 2020 election. That fall, when we saw a New York Post story reporting on Joe Biden's family, we sent that story to fact checkers for review and temporarily demoted it."
You know, you do some tweets that seem to be, or at least give support to some who would call others conspiracy theories.
Well, yes, but I mean, honestly, you know, some of these conspiracy theories have turned out to be true.
Which ones?
Well, like the Hunter Biden laptop.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am in awe of Ms. Jankowicz. When the department picked her, did it know that she had said that Mr. Hunter Biden's laptop is Russian disinformation? Did it know that she had vouched for the veracity of the Steele dossier?
Senator, let me repeat myself and add an additional fact. One, we do not discuss internal hiring processes.
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech.
be a conspiracy theorist is to have been right all along, despite the efforts of the paid-for liars. And it's also to be demonstrably well ahead of the gullible, still believing in smoke and mirrors. Conspiracy theorist was first used by the CIA to shut down those who doubted the official line about the murder of John F. Kennedy, that fishy old tale about a lone shooter and a magic bullet, and then that lone shooter being shot by another lone shooter before he could talk. That was in the 1960s, and from then, the label conspiracy theorist worked for decades as the means to make thinking people too scared to speak when they smelt a rat. Let 2024 be the year of clearing out the rubbish, the trash, the long overdue year when the past or sell-by date labels, conspiracy theorist among them, are cast into the dustbin of history.
Wake up, everybody. Welcome into Redacted. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores. And right now, the mainstream media is all in alignment, trying to push us into war with Iran and China all at the same time. Just over the past 24 hours, major developments towards a push against into war with Iran. And I like what this commenter says here on Rumble. Last Beacon just posted this on our live, because we're live. Last Beacon says, honestly, the Obama and post-Obama America has made me sick. But what makes me even more sick is that so many conservatives are willing to backstab Trump and the conservative cause. And that seems to be what's happening right now. All these warmongers trying to surround Trump, pushing us into this war with Iran.
Right. We also have the spending bill that includes all kinds of nonsense, things that are not priorities in order to keep the government from shutting down. Now there are many Republicans who say they will crash this bill. There is a movement to do that. If that's the case, the government would shut down on the 20th, which is this coming weekend. Will that happen, and what is the fight? There's some truly nonsensical things in there, such as a report to not boycott Israel. Why, Clayton? Why do you think a spending bill
in the United States government
would call for a report on any businesses, including a provision to punish them, who boycott Israel? Is this not the land of the free? Can't I boycott whoever I want?
You can, but I guess, if it's controlled by, all these special interests, then you can't. Also in the spending bill, multiple fundings for biolabs. Yes,
Yes.
Have we not learned our frickin' lesson? How is Speaker Johnson allowing this to happen? We're going to talk about that. We're also
can liberals still boycott sex if we can't boycott things?
I hope liberals boycott sex because
so we're for that boycott,
it's
not others. I'm confused on the boycott as a social justice cause.
That's Darwinism.
Does that then mean you can't boycott sex against Israelis? What happens?
Yeah, I guess you can. I don't know. Who knows? Also, we're going to be talking about Liz Cheney, and there's some dirt now. We're going to look at the investigation. Possibly, was she tampering with witnesses as it relates to the January 6th investigation? We've also got the latest Inspector General's report on January 6th. We're going to speak with Steve Baker, who was one of the journalists who was there that day and ended up getting arrested. The FBI came to his house as a result of the his coverage of that as an independent journalist. So we'll talk about all of that and more. We've got so much news to get to today, Clayton, on the show.
Who won the bonehead news comment of the year? It was not redacted.
Thankfully.
So if you're sticking around for that, no, we're going to tell you who Newsbusters has awarded. It's called the Brian Stelter Award for Worst Quote of the Year. It's not Brian Stelter who won it. He's the namesake of the award. The award. We're going to tell you who's the worst. I'm sure you have your guesses. Get your guesses in. But before we get there, we want to tell you that Redacted is brought to you by Indeed. Indeed is the #1 hiring location on the internet. So if you need to hire, you need Indeed. It's your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to their own data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast, so you don't have to sift through applications and resumes that may not fit your needs. You tell Indeed what your needs are, and then they go and match for you to make it so much simpler. Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. In fact, 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to, again, their own research. So you can get a $75 sponsored job credit if you head on over to Indeed.com/redacted if you're trying to hire for the upcoming business year. One more time, that's Indeed.com/redacted.
Well, who had war with Iran on your bingo card?
Always.
I certainly did here at Redacted. If you've been watching this show for any length of time, you know that they're pushing us towards war with Iran. This is the last, of course, of the major countries that Benjamin Netanyahu wants the United States to invade and destroy. We did their bidding on Libya, of course. We did it on Iraq. Syria has now fallen thanks to the CIA-backed overthrow of that government. So Iran is next, of course. All the king's men, all the king's horses are aligning right now, ready to launch a war against Iran, the likes of which would be catastrophic for the United States of America and the Middle East. Remember, of course, that there are over 60,000 Americans sitting ducks right now in the Middle East. Like, if maybe you love Israel, that's great. Do you care about America? Do you care about the 60,000 men and women who are on the United States Armed Forces who are sitting there right now, not in like massive stronghold military bases with massive bunkers and full infrastructure? No, many of these are outposts that would be destroyed if we launch a preemptive attack against Iran. Sitting ducks, cannon fodder, and the Biden administration has admitted as much on the record, on television. President Biden specifically said that it's just a matter of time before they get attacked. Well, then get them the hell out of there. Instead, you're letting them sit there as cannon fodder, which these warmongers like to do, of course. So we're getting dangerously close to a war with Iran right now. The legacy media, the neocons in Washington, are fast-tracking this before President Trump takes office, trying to do Israel's bidding once again. As we warned you for months, this, of course, was the plan all along. You'd have to be a moron not to have seen this coming. And now, overnight, the IDF sees chances for strikes on Iran's nuke sites after knocking out Syrian air defenses. And, the IDF is now doubling down on this position. So these are soft targets now. We better move into Iran now that Syria is out of the picture. So the CIA took Syria off the table, and the Times of Israel reports that the IDF is ready to start bombing Iran, of course. And now Canadian warmongers, like this is spread internationally now among this warmongering cabal, are getting ready to push us towards a war with Iran. Pierre Poilievre, I guess you could call him a neoconservative in Canada, because the guy openly supports additional weapons and munition and money, of course, to Ukraine, the most corrupt government in Europe, is now saying, absolutely, we should double down. And he wants to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities. Like, this would be a big Christmas gift, or I guess a big Hanukkah gift to Israel. Like, we're going to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities? Listen to him.
Yesterday you said that you endorse Israel proactively defending itself by hitting Iran's nuclear sites, which is something that President Joe Biden does not endorse. Do you not feel like this could lead to a likelihood of an all-out conventional war between Iran and Israel? And do you not agree with Joe Biden and his assessment?
I think the idea of allowing a genocidal, theocratic, unstable dictatorship that is desperate to avoid being overthrown by its own people to develop nuclear weapons is about the most dangerous and irresponsible thing that the world could ever allow. And if Israel were to stop that genocidal, theocratic, unstable government from acquiring nuclear weapons, it would be a gift by the Jewish state to humanity.
Wait, what?
Yeah,
he's talking about the Ayatollah?
Yeah. Yeah, he's talking about Iran.
I thought he was talking about Israel in the beginning. Because it sounded an awful lot like that description.
When did Canadian exceptionalism become a thing?
It's amazing. So there you go. Again, these neocons are popping up in Canada as well. Pierre Poilievre, proving how dumb the DC media elite are, listening to the legacy media, which would love nothing more than for Trump to start a war with Iran as well. A few weeks ago, President Trump was asked about Iran. Would he intervene in Iran? He said, no, the Iranian people should have a say in their own government. We should stay out of it. Those were his words a few weeks ago. And listen to Trump yesterday take on the legacy media, which again is all aligning themselves now with, you guys going to start attacking Iran? When are you guys going to start attacking Iran? Listen.
against Iran's nuclear
Well, I can't
facilities?
tell you that.
I mean,
it's a wonderful question, but how can am I going to do preemptive strikes? Why would I say that? Can you imagine if I said yes or no? You'd say, that was strange that he answered that way. Am I going to do preemptive strikes on Iran? Is that a serious question? How could I answer a question like that? Say it.
Would you be in support of Israeli strikes on Iran's nuclear
How could I tell you?
The media just desperately want. You do want to bomb Iran, right? You want to do it preemptively?
Which war are we going to next, sir?
You want to do this?
Joe Biden's given us a lot. Which ones are we going to cover under you? We got to have something to do.
So Trump is Trump going to bomb Iran? Well, the Wall Street Journal sure hopes so. So they're reporting today that the Trump team is preparing for possible attacks on Iran's nuclear capabilities. This, of course, over the past few days. Trump team weighs options, including airstrikes, to stop Iran's nuclear program.
Let me guess. A source familiar says.
Oh, no, anonymous sources.
Right.
Yeah,
a familiar source says.
So this is how they do it, right? These anonymous sources, whatever, they put these stories out there. They drop them in the New York Times. They drop them in the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post. Yeah, sources familiar with Trump's thinking.
Who was that? Me.
And
that was me who wrote
that. They normalize this stuff. Like, yeah, this is like perfectly, yeah, we're going to normalize it. Attack. So they put it all over the mainstream media, make it normal. And then, of course, they tie it. We'll get to the drone part of this piece in a second here. But, these are, Iranian drones. There's motherships off the coast. And did Iran launch a dirty bomb inside the United States? Are they trying to assassinate President Trump? Like Roger Stone pointed out, don't fall for it, that Iran was trying to assassinate President Trump. Don't fall for the false flags. They desperately want, they want to align like conservatives and conservative media and everyone around the idea that we need to go and preemptively attack Iran. They want World War III desperately. They really, really do. I sure hope not. But this is the case here. And this is what Caitlin Johnstone writes today. She said, Trump and Israel can't wait to start bombing Iran. She says Israeli media reports that the IDF now sees airstrikes on Iran as much easier to execute now that its pilots don't have to worry about the Syrian air defenses along the way. While the Wall Street Journal reports that the Trump team is weighing its options for airstrikes on Iran to prevent it from obtaining a nuclear weapon, which there's no evidence Iran currently is trying to do.
Which the Obama administration spent a decade trying to prove and sanctioned them into poverty and sickness. But cool, we know it now based on what? What do we know now that we didn't know when Obama was trying to,
Where's the evidence?
Launch the world's first cyber weapon when Obama did that?
No, you should just trust what you should just trust what the CIA is telling us about Iran. Like, don't do any sort of independent studies on this. Don't have any third-party international body going to Iran to confirm or deny this. Just listen to what the CIA and the deep state and these warmonger neocons in Washington, D.C. want you to believe. Don't do any independent thinking.
I read the book. The guy who designed the sanctions in the book called The Art of Sanction, demonic book. The guy who designed the sanctions that Obama put on Iran on no proof, on total hearsay. He didn't even know. He said probably they had it. This is why we had to do it, and this is why it worked. It's an awful book. Look it up on Amazon.
The Art of Sanctions.
The Art of Sanctions.
There is zero evidence that Iran is trying to build a nuclear weapon. Zero. Even the United States' own Defense Department, the Pentagon, says there's no evidence of this. Okay, maybe the Pentagon's lying because, maybe that's what they do. So why would they lie to us about this? Normally, they would come out on the opposite side of this and say, yeah, we have total evidence that this is happening. So too did recently the head of the IAEA, Rafael Grossi. The IAEA said that Iran has been working with them satisfactorily. This is the International Atomic Energy Agency speaking about Iran, about these recent inspections, and they saw no evidence that they're moving towards a nuclear weapon. Listen.
Have, for example, the enrichment activities up to 60% been in technical detail, or have you been discussing this with heads of state you have been meeting regarding that it is hardly to explain an enrichment program to this extent with a non-military enrichment program? Have they been able to give you an explanation for that?
Well, in fact, they don't need to give me an explanation of why they enrich at 60%. What we need to ensure is that we have the necessary ability to inspect the activities there. They enriched at the levels that they declare. There are certain parameters, as you know, between an inspected state and the IAEA. They tell us this is what we are going to do, and then we perform the necessary inspections. So in that regard, in terms of motivations and reasons, which I believe is a little bit behind your question, we don't discuss that. For us, what is important, the only thing that matters is that we are able to inspect, that we are able to account for every gram of enriched material that is there. And this is the spirit of the exchanges, and we have been working satisfactorily in that regard. There have been other types of issues, and as you know, but they are not directly related to this particular issue.
Okay, but then yesterday something changed all of a sudden. So what happened all of a sudden? Like, why now are they changing their tune on this? Very interesting. So now Grossi suddenly flipped his tune in the past 24 hours. Rafael Grossi tells the Italian ANSA news agency that Iran is moving quickly to obtain a nuclear device, is enriching uranium to near military grade. Okay. And International Atomic Energy Agency Rafael Grossi said the nuclear deal with Iran is no longer relevant and that Iran is enriching uranium to a military grade, is rapidly nearing the position of a nuclear state. Grossi spoke during a visit to the Italian Foreign Ministry on Monday. What changed?
But has he been there? Because they've
no evidence he's been there.
They've been signaling for the last 6 months that they're trying to speak with Iran, that they're arranging more visits there. The clip we just showed you was from early in 2023 when they said we're on it. And if you follow the IAEA's own news site, they tell you about the discussions that they're having. So based on what evidence? It's just what we're saying. There's a comment here. Mr. Protractor said that Redacted is the Chicken Little of internet news. We're telling you that we don't fall for false flags. We're telling you we don't want a war with Iran based on false flags after we learned our lesson from the war in Iraq about no weapons of mass destruction. So I think we're kind of the opposite of Chicken Little. Maybe you don't know that lore.
No, we're literally telling you the sky is not falling. We're literally telling you, no, don't go to war. We're literally telling you the opposite of this. Don't fall for these false flags where they're trying to get us into war. How many false flags do you need to wake you people up? I mean, the USS Maine, for crying out loud, we went to war, right? The Spanish-American War.
Yugoslavia.
The Gulf of Tonkin.
Right.
Why did we go to Vietnam? 9/11, for crying out loud. How many more pieces of evidence and false flags do you need? What we're doing is warning you against this, to stop it. We are an anti-war show here on Redacted. We are not a pro-war, warmongering neocon show.
We want to see the evidence. We want to see the evidence. We don't want anonymous sources saying maybe this country is nuclear, so we're going to preemptively strike. We're done with that. Their burden of proof is on the neocons now. They must show it to us. And then maybe if we see proof, we'll say something different. But at this point, we're done with words and false reports.
So let's go back to Grossi, because he made those comments and then Iran fired back. So I want to give you the Iranian side of this. So they fired back at this against Grossi. He says, you're not a politician, and slammed them for this unprofessional remarks on the nuclear program, says there's no truth to it. So I don't know. You don't have to believe Iran. You don't have to believe Grossi. It doesn't really matter. The point is you can see all of the pieces of what is happening. And by the way, Israel has a nuclear program that they lie about. They've lied about it since the 1960s. JFK was told about the nuclear program by Eisenhower, and they lied to JFK's face. They weren't allowed to have nuclear weapons, and they developed them anyway. Israel did. So you're not allowed to talk about it. It's off limits. Even Israelis, if you talk to them about it, they're like, whoosh, we can't talk about it. It's you're not allowed to mention it. Everyone in the world knows that, Alex Jones talks about it all the time. Israel has nuclear weapons. They pretend that they don't, but they do.
They also have a whistleblower in political prison for saying such. Look up the story of Mordecai Vanunu and then go kiss my
You're Vanunu. So don't fall. So don't, guys. You guys are smart here. Don't fall for this crap. Please don't fall for this stuff. All of these people, the legacy media, they're lining up right now to try to get us into war before Trump takes office. You even have like this whole drone story right now. You have Congressman Jeff Van Drew this past week talking about the drones as an Iranian mothership out there. And these are all Iranian drones. And the other piece of this, of course, is that there's missing nuclear material. And there could be a dirty bomb that Iran has let loose in New Jersey. And that's why all these drones are searching for an Iranian dirty bomb right now. Watch.
High-level sources are telling him these drones may have come from.
Know that Iran made a deal with China to purchase drones, motherships, and technology in order to go forward. These drones should be shot down. Whether it was some crazy hobbyist that we can't imagine, or whether it is Iran, and I think it very possibly could be, they should be shot down.
Yeah, it's Iran, of course. So all those drones that you're saying, it's Iran. Or it's drones looking for the dirty bomb that Iran has let loose on the east coast of the United States. So we should just go bomb Iran. And the 60,000 Americans who are in the Middle East, you guys are fine. Nothing will happen to you. There won't be any sort of retaliation. There won't be any attacks on your bases. So we'll be watching this very, very closely.
All right, well, let's talk about the spending bill because the United States government is about to hit a debt ceiling on December 20th. That date's important, so keep it in mind. That's this weekend. Now, a handful of House Republicans are saying absolutely not. We will not pass this proposed spending package because it's full of crap. That's exactly what it is. It is supposed to fund the government through March 14th, but lawmakers are debating this because the government, again, is trying to shove a bunch of laws in a spending bill, a bunch of new spending in an emergency spending bill, and we can see it. Guess what? We can read. I guess they shouldn't have taught us that. Here's the bill. If you have time just before Christmas to read 1,500 plus pages, House Speaker Mike Johnson, the robot, has put this bill forward, and it's full of absolute nonsense that would increase the U.S. debt limit, but also add more to the grocery cart, much like when I take my middle schooler to Target. And then we get home and I said, where'd this lip gloss come from? Oh, you said, she says. How'd that get in there? Well, it has a lot more than just lip gloss, though. Does she do that to you, too? You're laughing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all the time.
I'm like, how'd this extra bag of chips get in here?
What's this? What's this new toner? She's 12. She doesn't need a toner. So, yeah, that's basically what this bill is. It's like taking your middle schooler to Target and then getting all kinds of stuff you did not intend to get. So here's some kinds of that so-called lip gloss. Let's see. Non-emergency payments, including $130 billion to renew the Farm Bill, $100 billion in disaster relief. Where does that go? Certainly not to North Carolina, certainly not to people that need it, but at least the agency will get it, if not the people. $10 billion in stimulus for farmers, $8 billion to replace the Francis Scott Key Bridge. There's money for biolabs in this bill. Yes, there absolutely is. You might have seen libs of TikTok post about this. And in fact, it's true. Take this. Section 629 has 52 million. Maybe it's billion. I didn't write it. That's possibly a typo on my behalf. Read it for yourself. For biocontainment laboratories, because 50 million seems too small for 12 biocontainment laboratories. So check that. Fact check me on that. The bill also establishes a commission to stop companies from boycotting Israel. What the heck is this doing in a spending package? It says that a report must be compiled to make sure that no U.S. companies are boycotting Israel in accordance with the Anti-Boycott Act of 2018. But guess what? That's not law. The Anti-Boycott Act of 2018 was, in fact, never passed. Some states have anti-boycott Israel laws on their books, but anti-boycott Israel federal law never passed Congress, despite 2 tries at it. So why is that in a spending bill that you don't decide if you don't want to support Israel? There's also language in there about licensing and enforcement. What the heck does that mean? Like, if you are a construction company and you don't maybe want to buy something from Israel, they can pull your licenses or put some kind of local enforcement on you. I don't like that. You're supposed to be able to boycott whoever the heck you want in a free country, right?
Right.
Starbucks, Hobby Lobby, Russia. but not Israel. Okay. So
Bud
why
Light.
is that there?
It's okay to, Bud Light.
Bud Light,
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A, whatever the heck you want. You're supposed to be able to boycott sex if you're a liberal and you don't like the Trump administration, but you can't boycott Israel. Or like Philip said at the beginning of the show, maybe sex with people from Israel. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how that works out. So far, a growing list of Republicans have said they will not vote for this. But Speaker Johnson's saying, look, this is the last time I'm going to ask you for this. Just one more time. We'll cut spending when Republicans can control Congress. I'm not going to even play you this clip because he's lame, but you can see it for yourself here on his X post. So, right. Representative Thomas Massey says this bill's full of all kinds of foreign aid, and it is essentially like watering the neighbor's yard while your house is on fire. Now, in September, when this deadline was assigned, Massey predicted exactly what would happen exactly as it is happening. So I'm going to play you this 3-minute clip and recall he said this in September, and we're here. This is it. This is our reality.
I also predicted this would fall right before Christmas, and I believe this does fall on December 20th. Now, why have we picked December 20th? Because it's the same reason we always have December 20th. Everybody up here is human. There are no AIs or robots in Congress. And when you get to December 20th, you're 5 days from Christmas. You're 4 days from Christmas Eve. And you desperately want to be there with your family. So this is when the leadership here has the maximum influence. And again, I'm talking to the Democrats and the Republicans because you've seen it on the Democrat side of the aisle. They love to pick the week before Christmas for this showdown because you can smell the jet fuel fumes over at DCA. It smells like Christmas, that you're going to get to go home and open presents. I've been in HC5 when literally the Speaker of the House, not the Speaker we have now, walks in and says, if you vote for this, you can go home and unwrap presents with your kids. And if you don't vote for this, you're going to spend Christmas here with Nancy Pelosi. And then the chant starts, vote, 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 vote. Literally, people get enthusiastic to vote for something that they haven't read. So let me predict what we're not going to do on December 20th before I take a guess at what we're going to do. What we're not going to do, we're not going to do 12 separate bills. We are not going to spend this time. We've got a few months between now and December 20th. We could go back to working on appropriations bills. We are not going to do this. This sucker, whatever happens on December 20th, whether it's another CR to kick the can down the road for 3 more months, or whether it's an omnibus that funds all of government with one bill, it's going to be written behind closed doors. And every lobbyist in this town is going to try to attach their little thing to this bill. This train is leaving the station.
That's exactly what happened. All kinds of lobbyist goodies under this tree in this bill. So he nailed it. Well, go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to say, and it's funny, he said the speaker usually runs this out, and he said, not this speaker, speaking of Johnson, and then he's the one that ended up doing it.
Yeah, right. So he's been there before. This is a stop me if you think you've heard this one before line. But he is holding the line. He says he will vote against it. And so are at least at this, the last I counted, 8 other Republicans in the House. And so is his fellow statesman, Rand Paul. Rand Paul says that he will, now this is hearsay, he hasn't said it. As far as I've seen, this is rumor at this point, says that he will delay the passage of the bill if it clears the House. If is a big if here, potentially leading to a government shutdown if not passed by Friday. So someone has got to break this cycle. We just can't keep doing this every 6 months and then putting more lip gloss in the cart, if you know what I mean. Ava. Right. Of course, Republicans don't have to pass this. They're coming into full power in all 3 chambers of all 3 legislative bodies. So they could say, no, we're not going to do this. And then when we get into power, we're going to put a more sensible bill in. Will they do that? What do you think? So let us know. Also, I have one more point of we were talking about the last time that Rafael Grossi had traveled to Iran. That was in November of this year. So he did, in fact, go since that last meeting. I just want to make that clear so that we don't misreport that.
Great. Yeah, let us know. Do you guys think, first of all, do you guys agree with a government shutdown? Would you guys be okay with a government shutdown? Would you be fine for them to close the doors on a lot of this garbage? I know there's, so many members of the federal government who, of course, would be affected by this. There are people, in all different branches of the military that are not like primary. So like the NOAA Corps and that sort of thing that would be affected by this if there's a government shutdown. I think like the Forest Service and that would be affected by this, right? They wouldn't get paychecks. So
no, it's the wrong people that get punished. Absolutely, right. And they're being held hostage by the wrong people who have their hands out.
Yeah.
And so you have to think, if you're one of these lobbyists who shoved your stuff in this bill, you are hurting regular American people it's a tax on all of us. Absolutely it is. And it's new legislation that's not passed by Congress through the normal legislative process. And you're holding us all up for your wish list on social justice fallacies.
Well, at least they're getting almost $1 trillion for the military-industrial complex and for us to continue sending billions to Ukraine and Israel and all around the world, but the United States, it gets shafted once again. All right, we've got more news to get to here in a second. We're going to talk about Liz Cheney and this investigation. Wait till you see the text messages. We're going to get there in a second. But first, big changes are on the horizon. We saw RFK Jr. on Capitol Hill today and yesterday. He's taking over at the CDC, the NIH, the FDA are getting ready for a big shakeup. RFK Jr. even posted the FDA's war on public health is about to end, calling out their suppression of treatments like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, essential vitamins. The wellness company is already ahead of the curve with emergency kits that are stocked with these limited access medications. These kits cut through the red tape, especially during the holidays when getting sick during travel is the norm. So be prepared for over 30 different illnesses without stepping into an urgent care center, tackling the issue head on before it develops. I'm talking ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, Z-Pak, amoxicillin, everything you need to take control of your health. Their guidebook outlines common treatments for UTIs, strep throat, bacterial infections, respiratory illnesses, and more. And all it takes is filling out a simple digital intake form, and then your kit will arrive at your door in 1 to 2 weeks. We have one upstairs right now in our what do you call it? Medicine cabinet. That's the word I'm looking for. We have an emergency kit right there for our family, just in case. No more sick inconveniences. So, and it's for USA residents only, but there's the website. Go to twc.health/redacted. You'll get $30 off at checkout plus free shipping. Just have one of these in your home just to be safe. twc.health/redacted. Thanks to our friend, Dr. Peter McCullough over at the Wellness Company for creating this. All right. Well, neocon warmonger Liz Cheney is in hot water. The House Republican-led panel is turning up the heat on the former Congresswoman, calling for a federal criminal investigation into alleged witness tampering during her time as vice chair of the corrupt January 6th committee. Now, Cheney is accused of secretly communicating with Cassidy Hutchinson, a key witness, through the Signal app. She was using Signal to do this without Hutchinson's lawyer knowing about it. Direct connection with a witness. Who is Cassidy Hutchinson, you might ask? Well, she's a former aide to Trump's White House, Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. She became the star witness and a central figure, of course, in the January 6 hearings after she provided really dramatic testimony that was blown up all over mainstream media about events leading up to and during the Capitol protest.
Can I just point out the beauty of the fact that her dad masterminded the programs that would later spy on all Americans, which was whistleblown by Edward Snowden, who's one of the founders of Signal, who she used to covertly communicate with this whistleblower.
Yeah.
Did anybody else make that connection?
I love
it's kind of beautiful, right?
It's karma.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's karma. The Cheney karma. Well,
sorry to derail you.
Yeah.
I couldn't what? So she's using Signal for witness tampering?
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
So among Cassidy Hutchinson's most notable and ridiculous claims was the allegation that Donald Trump leapt over the back seat of a Secret Service vehicle. Because you can definitely picture Donald Trump like leaping, right? And he tried to grab the steering wheel of his presidential vehicle and then physically assaulted a Secret Service agent in order to try and drive back to the Capitol building. You have to take me to the Capitol. I'm jumping across the front seat. I'm going to grab the steering wheel. I'm going to punch out a Secret Service agent. Get me back to the Capitol building. Watch her testimony.
The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president. Take me up to the Capitol now." To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel.
Yeah. Like, hey, you can't go there. And Trump jumps over the seat to try to drive over there. It's the dumbest thing ever. Of course, these claims have been since debunked by other witnesses and Secret Service officials. She has no credibility. But here's where things get really interesting. According to a Republican report released on Tuesday, Cheney's actions may have violated several federal laws, specifically 18 U.S.C. 1512. The report states specifically, evidence uncovered by the subcommittee revealed that former Congresswoman Liz Cheney tampered with at least one witness, Cassidy Hutchinson. The secret communication with a witness is improper, they write in their report. Screenshots of the signal messages allegedly exchanged between Cheney and Hutchinson have now been presented as evidence in the report, and we have them here. Take a look at your screen. So here is Liz Cheney. "Hi, this is Cassidy Hutchinson. I'm sorry for reaching out this way, but I was hoping to have a private conversation with you soon. Are you willing to?" And then Liz Cheney writes back, "I'd be happy to. Let me know what time works for you. I'm free all day for a call or in person, whichever you prefer. I really appreciate this." Then there's a phone call. "Give me a call when it's good for you. Is now okay? Okay. Can we aim for 1 o'clock? Sure, that works. I'm sorry I missed you. Please call when you have a moment. I'm worried to initiate the call in case you're tied up with something." And it goes on to say, "Yes, we'll call you shortly. Sorry, I got stuck on another call." And they go back and forth. "Can I give you a call tomorrow?" "Of course. Everything okay?" Back and forth, back and forth. So interactions with this witness. Republicans are now questioning whether Cheney influenced Hutchinson's under oath testimony, potentially advising her to fabricate or alter parts of her account. And that seems to be separately corroborated now by separate reporting from the Daily Caller, which we'll get to in a second. So if proven true, this could have major legal and political implications for Cheney, who's already faced criticism, of course, for her role on the January 6th committee. Recall that, of course, Liz Cheney went on Good Morning America with Jonathan Karl and talked about how doing exactly what she's accused of doing, witness tampering, would be criminal, and that they should definitely look into that at the Department of Justice if Republicans, if other members were doing that, like on the Trump side, if they were interfering with any kind of witnesses, that should be looked into by the Department of Justice. Watch.
They believe that they can affect the testimony of witnesses before the committee, and it's something we take very seriously. And it's something that people should be aware of. It's a very serious issue, and I would imagine the Department of Justice would be very interested in and would take that very seriously as well.
In fact, Cheney told me that the committee may make a criminal referral to the Justice Department recommending that anybody that attempted to influence witness testimony before the committee be prosecuted for witness tampering.
Oh, and of course, recall just a few days ago, Liz Cheney said,
she warned, reportedly, she's been warning that any lawyer who investigates members of the January 6th committee will be engaging in conduct subject to sanctions. That's the sort of warning she's been putting out in Washington circles, to which Harmeet Dillon, who is tapped by Trump to be the assistant attorney general, posted on X, "Oh, really?" Which I read as, this is a gauntlet, and we're about to pick that up, girl, because she will be the assistant attorney general. So she's trying to warn people off. How can you sanction the assistant attorney general for investigating you? Wouldn't other people have already tried that?
You would think. Donald Trump has thoughts on it. He just posted this at 3 a.m. He posted, "Liz Cheney could be in a lot of trouble based on the evidence obtained by the subcommittee, which states that numerous federal laws were likely broken by Liz Cheney, and these violations should be investigated by the FBI. Thank you to Congressman Bill Loudermilk on a job well done." Newsmax by Greg Kelly. But the plot thickens, because now, Alyssa Farah, of course, she's the current host of The View. There she is. There's Alyssa Farah. You might recognize her from, not just working on The View, but of course, she was a former Trump administration official. She even stepped in for, I think, Kelly McEnany when Kelly McEnany was out for a short time. Anyway, Now the Daily Caller is reporting that Farah suggested to the Star January 6 investigation witness Cassidy Hutchinson that she should leak to the media while the investigation was ongoing. These texts were obtained exclusively by the Daily Caller in this new investigation and show this back and forth with Alyssa Farah and Cassidy Hutchinson. I know you're busy, but there's a chance you've touched base with anyone regarding what we talked about Tuesday night. So I reached out to Liz Cheney. She agreed to keep our convo totally confidential. She said she admires you. She could tell you that she wanted to do the right thing from your testimony. Her one concern was so long as you have counsel, she really can't ethically talk to you without him. But she suggests is a follow-up with you, with your lawyer, that she and Dan George can lead, possibly can do with other members and Tim. Does that help at all? I mean, I don't even understand that broken English mostly, but I can tell she really wants to work with you and just trying to figure out the right way to do it. I mean, do you think this is actually of interest to her at this point? Like, have they moved beyond it? Oh, it's very much of interest. She basically just wants to structure your testimony, I'm adding that word because that's what we're talking about here, in a way that you're comfortable, and wants to make sure it's clear. If you speak to them again, it's them asking, not you, so that you don't get in trouble. So, and the text messages go on. So basically, she wants to structure your testimony so that when you present it, she's had this interaction with you. She knows when you come before the committee how to do this, and doing this without speaking to your lawyer. So basically, Farah here is confirming that she's been speaking to her without her lawyer, without her legal counsel.
Yeah.
The development raises serious questions, of course, about the integrity of the witnesses, about Liz Cheney, and of course, we now know the corrupt January 6th committee. Let's
do the 9/11 Commission next while we're at it.
Yeah.
Let's do all of it. Okay. Amazing. Okay, well, Disney's Pixar has pulled another transgender storyline from one of its shows for children. So during the Biden years.
So the anti-woke movement is winning.
It seems. It would seem. I don't love this, go woke, go broke. I think it's a simplistic term, but it does seem as though Disney's getting the picture that you're not the parents. We are. We want to talk about this stuff. You don't need to shove it in your programming in order to teach kids to see it the way you do, or you're a leftist artist, or anything of the sort. So this show is called Win or Lose, and it's a show about middle school softball team, and it features the backstory of one player per week. And they were going to put a backstory of a transgender character, and they decided not to. Because that seems very out of fashion now in the coming year 2025. A spokesperson for Disney confirmed this and said this to The Hollywood Reporter. When it comes to animated content for a younger audience, we recognize that many parents would prefer to discuss certain subjects with their children on their own terms and timeline. Way to come around to that respectful view of the family, Disney. But I would like a clarification on what they mean for younger audience, because I myself am very wary of Disney shows for my tweens. So, okay, animated, I'm thinking, what do you think, 10 and under? But let's do that I would like to raise that bar just a little bit and lower the sexual content on Disney channels for tweens. That's what I have to say. This comes after Disney had already canceled plans to include a transgender storyline in a show called Moon Girl and the Dinosaur. So way to catch up, Disney.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I mean, I think this is a great sign, right? I think, people, they're finally paying attention. You saw them totally destroy Star Wars.
Yeah.
With their whole, woke plans with that show, totally destroyed that show.
It's just,
the Acolyte was a total disaster.
It's too young for sexualizing kids. That's just it. Do what you want. Don't tell the kids about it. Leave that to us.
And we can't pretend that they're doing this because, they finally realized that. They're doing this because it finally hit their bottom line. Let's be honest.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
They're losing money.
Of course.
All it's about.
It was a total disaster. Mm-hmm. You're seeing that. Who wants to go see those movies anymore? There was what about that Snow White movie? That totally bombed too.
It hasn't come out, Clayton.
It's
it comes
going
out in March.
I predict it will.
Okay. You're looking into the future.
You can really tell I'm plugged into what to
your animated princess or your feature-length princess films.
Yeah, I got a whole calendar on my refrigerator of all the new princess films that are coming out. I can't wait.
It's not just about stopping to put sexualization into characters, but it's also, Disney's put warning signals now on Peter Pan and things like that because
they've retroactively gone back to those early movies.
And so will they just stop that now? Stop the, rewriting of history of old films? That there's a lot to correct, not just not doing these things going forward.
You have to think if Walt Disney were alive today, he would absolutely flip out. I mean, his sort of idealized version of America, like in what he had envisioned for America, has been totally transformed by these woke idiots who are running the company now.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, let's talk about the Fed, shall we? Because just moments ago, get ready, folks, because the Fed just cut some interest rates once again. And get ready for this, a massive recession hitting in 2025 as the Fed rate cuts hit again today. I like how Zero Hedge writes it. Countdown to 2025 recession has begun. Yes, Trump will be blamed. Next debt step function, $15 trillion in debt to the current baseline. Expect $50 trillion in debt in the next 2 years, thanks to what the Fed just did. So what did the Fed just do today? Well, Jerome Powell and his minions cut its benchmark rate by 25 basis points to 4.25% to between 4.5%, the target range. It also cut its overnight reverse repo facility rate from 4.55 to 4.25. So, but take a look at your screen here. So the question is why? Because why are they cutting these rates now? Look in September when those rate cuts began. Because the argument is we need to get inflation under control. Well, now, as you can see, inflation has surged as a result of this. So again, look, the red line here, this is the U.S. Bloomberg economic inflation data surprise number here. Look at that. It's surging. So inflation skyrocketing again, right after the rate cuts begin. So this argument that rates are, and the idea is, oh, well, these rates are too restrictive, right? They're holding people back. Okay. Well, as Zero Hedge writes this, they claim that rates are restrictive, then show them this chart. Financial conditions are at their loosest since before the Fed started hiking rates. So see the two circles there? So before they started hiking rates, right now financial conditions were at its loosest. So we're back there. It's already loose. You don't need to keep cutting rates. I know it's good for people that are trying to get mortgages right now and so forth, but it's absolutely detrimental. And you're going to see this reflected in the data once 2025 hits. We're going to see this massive recession. They will blame Trump for it, of course, but it's the unelected Federal Reserve that needs to be ended. We have a t-shirt on our website at redactedstore.com, End the Fed, because they are an unelected cabal of globalists that are driving the United States into the toilet and totally undercutting the U.S. dollar. And the Fed, it really is created in order to print money, in order to keep us in these perpetual wars. Mm-hmm. And that's all the Fed is.
It's a financial cartel, as Ron Paul calls it.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is.
The idea of like 15 trillion in debt is, that is such a stupidly large number. It's like nonsensical. It might as well be like $1 billion, quadrillion dollar. Like it just doesn't, It's a nonsensical number. It's so huge. Like,
how can you ever dig out of it?
What is anybody supposed to do with that? Yeah.
Right.
$50 trillion. Yeah, you're going to add 15 trillion onto it now. So we're already 36 trillion. You're just adding 15 trillion by doing this. And we're going to be at $50 trillion in debt when President Trump is president of the United States over the next year and a half. And this recession is set to hit. And of course, everyone will blame Trump. It's Trump's fault. Mm-hmm. Maybe they can end the Fed. We'll see.
Well, Newsbusters has awarded what they call the Brian Stelter Award for Worst Quote of the Year. So it's kind of like the Oscars for boneheaded things that people say on cable news. Brian Stelter is not a recipient. It's just he's the namesake because we would call him the best at saying the worst things. He's one of TV's top boneheads, we could say. I'm going to call it the bonehead.
I think Tucker used to call him the eunuch, a eunuch that works at CNN.
Okay. I don't know. So yeah, he's got this award named after him. And so the 2024 recipient, without further ado, I give you this year's winner. Drum roll, please. It's MSNBC's Joe Scarborough for saying that President Biden was intellectually and analytically the best Biden ever. Remember, he said this before the Democrats could President Biden and put Kamala Harris in place. He was trying to sell us this notion that Joe Biden is at his top game. Watch.
But comparing that guy's mental state, I've said it for years now, he's cogent. But I undersold him when I said he was cogent. He's far beyond cogent. In fact, I think he's better than he's ever been. Intellectually, analytically, because he's been around for 50 years. And, you know, I don't know if people know this or not, Biden used to be a hothead. Sometimes that Irishman would get in front of the reasoning. Sometimes he would say things he didn't want to say. This is, and I don't really, you know what, I don't really care. Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Not a close second. And I've known him for years. The Brzezinskis have known him for 50 years. If it weren't the truth, I wouldn't say it. And you
Okay. Yeah. Well, F me, because I cannot handle that truth.
Like 2 days later, then he went on the CNN debate and totally fell flat, and the Democrats cooed him and shoved in Kamala Harris. That's amazing.
How embarrassing that must be to watch when you've just lied like that for your own agenda. It's crazy to watch someone do that. Every time I see a clip like that, I think of, Monsters, Inc., when the little girl is in the monster world and then they present all kinds of salacious news articles or people like, I saw it right there. That's what it feels like. It's just the news will just run with any old crap. So yeah, you want to see the runners up though? Because there are 3 runners up for dumbest thing said. We're going to show you their clip of that. One of them is Sunny Hostin talking about Trump saying that there would be a financial bloodbath, and she pretended that he meant real bloodbath because she needed to for her coverage. So watch the 3 runners up and enjoy this. We're calling it the Bonehead Awards of the year. I love that it's a memorial award too.
Right.
He's alive.
I also was thinking about Joe Biden's legacy. He will be remembered as a great president. He will be mentioned in the same sentence as George Washington.
It scared me, honestly. I didn't think ever in my lifetime I would see that. He is using that kind of World War II rhetoric that led to the deaths of the murders of 6 million people.
Yeah.
There is an entire right-wing media ecosystem.
Yes.
It doesn't exist on the left.
Yes.
Does not exist.
Yes.
In the center or mainstream. And people are getting their information in very different ways now. Whether it was disinformation, misinformation, or different propaganda that they were feeding to the American public.
Yeah, I love John King shaking his head. Yes.
All right,
yes.
this we've already seen.
Yeah, we've already seen
You've
that
seen
one,
this one. So yeah, there's no echo chamber on the left, Clayton. Not at all.
Yeah, on the right there's an echo chamber, and John King's like, yes. We here at CNN are not part of a liberal left echo chamber.
They're crazy.
At all.
We're not.
Yeah, I mean, just okay. Look at Blue Sky. All the pansies that left X and who ran over to Blue Sky, the stupid app that no one's using, right? But now liberals are over there, like we're hanging out on Blue Sky, talking amongst ourselves because we need to be in this little fragile snowflake echo chamber over here.
There is such a thing as the woke right. Have you heard this term? The woke right? It's like the right who refuses to see things that they don't want to see either. Of course, there's sort of extremists on both sides, right? People who decide to put their head in the sand. That exists. There's an echo chamber to the extreme of any place. So that's why you're here on Redacted, because we're neither left nor right.
I mean, when we criticize Trump, you'll see a few people, they're like, how dare you criticize Trump? Well, we're allowed to criticize Trump. I mean, we're allowed to criticize any politicians. They're not God. So these people are human beings, and no one's perfect. We're allowed to criticize anyone. We criticize the United States face of America all the time because the promise of what this country stands for is not being lived up to right now by these elected leaders in the United States. So we're critical of anyone, and we're not afraid to. All right. Well, we got a lot more news to get to here. We're going to talk about the January 6th investigation on the Office of what am I trying to say here?
The intelligence report on January 6th.
The IG report.
Yeah, the IG report.
And Steve Baker, we're going to talk about that. I had a chance to sit down with Steve just a short time ago and talk about his experience there. He was a journalist there, an independent journalist there on that day. And then 2 years later, the FBI shows up at his house, arrests him. And the question is, will he be pardoned now? But he has a lot of thoughts about this Inspector General's report. We're going to talk about that. But first, this. Every single day I use ExpressVPN. We wouldn't be able to do our show here at Redacted without it because so many of the news sources we need to access are censored. So let me explain how this works. ExpressVPN is an app that encrypts and reroutes your online traffic through secure servers. Now, how does that work for us? Well, for instance, every day I use ExpressVPN to access different news sites around the world because of censorship in a lot of these countries, whether it's in Canada or Europe or even in the United States. Websites are blocked. Many of our Canadian viewers have trouble accessing our shows sometimes. In France, many important websites are blocked all throughout Europe. I mean, this is a common occurrence because of censorship. This is what we're living in right now through this era of censorship. It's really, really sad. But ExpressVPN allows you to anonymously reroute your traffic through any server that you want. So very often I'll use one in the United States. I'll use a server. You can pick one like in New Jersey or Arizona or other parts of the country. You can go to Iceland if you want to, or neutral Switzerland. You can pick servers all over the world to anonymously surf the web. And the worst, of course, is public Wi-Fi. If you're at a coffee shop or something like that and you want to do some banking or some personal emails, you should never, ever, ever just be surfing on public Wi-Fi without having ExpressVPN turned on, running in the background to protect yourself. That's all because hackers can easily steal your personal data when you're using unsecured public Wi-Fi. ExpressVPN has been on my computer for years. It's a must-use app that I use every single day here on Redacted. Natalie has it turned on and running on her computer as well. It's constantly running on the background, not only on our phones, but on our main desktop computers. Right now, you can take advantage of ExpressVPN's offer to get the absolute best VPN. Just go to expressvpn.com/redacted to get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. All right. And thank you. We have like 3 or 4 sponsors in our show per day in our large, like hour-long show. If you watch the mainstream media, they'll have about 24. So thanks to the sponsors who support us here at Redacted. We wouldn't be able to do it without those few sponsors that we do have. So thank you for the support. Some people are calling out, it's not echo chamber, it's echo chamber.
Did I say that?
You say eco, and then I picked it up on.
I was going to, when you guys were talking, I was going to say, or as people say, echo, but I didn't want to, I was choosing my battle.
That's one of those I always get wrong. And I know, I'm like, which one is the right one? Yeah, I own that.
So echo, because it's an echo chamber. You're speaking into it and you're hearing your voice back. You're hearing back what you want to hear. It's an echo. Eco is from the Greek oikos, which means home, like ecology. So there you go.
Yes. Got it. And someone in the chat says, echo chamber is going to be the new Pauly Shore movie.
Okay.
Echo chamber.
Sorry.
So echo. Yeah, and I just picked it up. She also says, how do you pronounce the car that Elon Musk makes?
Tesla.
She puts a Z in there. Tesla.
That's what I said.
Tesla. Okay, so I had a chance to sit down with Steve Baker. He's an independent journalist at the time. Now he works for the Blaze Media as an investigative journalist. And I want to get his take on this Inspector General's report that was just released that shows that there were, in fact, informants, FBI informants in the crowd that day. That means the FBI lied to the American people about their involvement there that day. And they lied in front of Congress as well in testifying. And Christopher Wray lied to members of Congress. So I sat down with Steve Baker just to get his sense of this Inspector General's report and what this means for J6ers going forward. Watch. So your response to this Inspector General's report, which shows and confirms that there were informants in the crowd that day, using that term instead of FBI agents, what did you make of that when you saw this report?
Well, first of all, when you analyze the report, and you've done as much research into this for the last 4 years as I have, you realize that there was a lot left out. And then when you talk about who the actual CHSs were, the confidential human sources, as opposed to FBI agents, as opposed to undercover agents. There's a lot of misinformation. In fact, there's a lot of misinformation on both sides, our side, their side, that are misinterpreting this report. Let's start from the beginning, because it can be worse and it can be not as bad depending upon how you look at it. The first thing is we know that we had this number of a couple dozen CHSs. Now, these are confidential human sources. These are not employees of the FBI. These are basically contractors that are assigned to follow somebody, this maybe even participate with them in the development of a crime to a certain place, but they're not supposed to break laws while they're doing that. We know that a number of them did, in fact, go inside the restricted space. We know that a number of them did go inside the building that day. And yet none of them were charged with crimes. And that actually has an interesting component to it, because they have a higher standard in that they know that they're not supposed to, participate and break any laws as a CHS. Now, again, they're not FBI agents. The one thing that this report does not cover, or let me back up. One thing that a lot of people are inappropriately commenting on and conflating this is they're calling these people undercover agents. No, they're not. An FBI undercover agent is a very specific assignment, a very specific protocol. It is a very specific duty, and you are trained to be an undercover agent. Now, there were probably, Clayton, I would estimate there were probably a couple of hundred FBI agents in that crowd that day. We're talking, well, the Hoover Building's just a few blocks down the road. The FBI Washington field office is there. And so because you are plain clothes, which most FBI special agents are anyway, it's not like the Hoover days when they all wore, black suit and tie and a white shirt. These guys dress casually. They wear jeans, they wear Docs, they wear button downs, they wear flannel shirts. And so these guys were in their offices that day, probably, I would assume, threw their winter, coats on and gloves and put a cap on and headed down to the crowd. And Clayton, that's not necessarily a nefarious thing. We would want our law enforcement agents to be in a position to observe and to a position to make sure that nothing bad happens in a crowd like that of that size, because that crowd ended up being much larger than anybody originally anticipated to begin with. And so having that many people observing and just doing the work of making sure that everybody's safe is not a bad thing. All right. Now, if any of them donned MAGA gear, if any of those agents wore a MAGA cap or put on a Trump scarf or were carrying a Trump flag or something like that, now we enter the world of undercover FBI agent. That's a completely different designation. We have no proof that happened yet. We know beyond any shadow of a doubt that FBI agents there. We have identified them fake. We have other journalists, other investigative reporters who have actually done the work and have identified them. And we know that they were there. We don't know the number of them, and we probably never will. We certainly don't know the number of them from this IG report, but they do talk about the fact that they had no evidence of undercover agents working that crowd.
The report does go on to say that these were members of the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. So they admit to that piece of it.
Well, look, I think there were probably more CHSs, confidential human sources, embedded in the Proud Boys than even this number reflects. There were certainly, we know because I covered the trials of the Oath Keepers, and we know that they had confidential human sources embedded in the Oath Keepers as well. I'm not so sure that the Oath Keepers had any there with them that day. It's likely they did, but they certainly were not on the same level as the Proud Boys. The Proud Boys famously, they like to knock heads. They were there to, they wanted to. What the Proud Boys wanted to do is they wanted to engage with Antifa and the like. They wanted to engage with leftist provocateurs, and that didn't really happen. So they took out their adrenaline and their testosterone in other ways, which they shouldn't have. But the Oath Keepers, by contrast, did not engage in violence that day at all. And they were a much smaller number in terms of the actual number of Oath Keepers that showed up. And the Oath Keepers is a much larger group. Oath Keepers had 35 to 40,000 members, paid membership And they only had, by FBI estimates, about 25 to 30 Oath Keepers there that day.
A couple of the things that really stood out to me in this report, the report says that those sources, those confidential human sources, had warned them of possible violence on January 6th. And yet that means that if they knew about this ahead of time, they didn't have the ample law enforcement there to stop it or to make sure that they could handle it.
You and I could spend 3 hours just on that question right there. And that's because that's where I've spent most of my work for the last 3.5 to 4 years, has been answering that question. And a lot of that has to do with why the intelligence was not passed down from senior leadership at the Capitol Police to their frontline officers. Their frontline officers had no idea what was coming that day. We know that from trial testimonies. We know that from whistleblowers. We know that from numerous sources within the Capitol Police, that they were not fed the intel that they had. Also, this IG report soft sells what they actually knew was coming that day. We know from past reports and past testimonies from so many others, including the January 6th committee, they knew what was coming. They knew that, in fact, there was and were reports that it was going to be infinitely worse than it was. They were expecting, quote unquote, MAGA to show up heavily armed with firearms, and that those firearms were going to be used against police, and that hopefully by the people that they were alleging to commit, that would be committing these crimes, were going to actually attack Congress members that day. And with all of this intel in their hands and available and passed up to Capitol Police leadership, this never was disseminated to the lower levels. But we know that the FBI knew about it, because, Clayton, the FBI pre-deployed the tactical units and SWAT teams of every three-letter federal agency were either in the Capitol, at the Capitol, or just outside the perimeter of the Capitol and ready to come in. And they were there. Within 5 minutes after Ashley Babbitt was shot, I was in the building when that happened. I saw ATF tactical teams all over the inside of the Capitol. They were already there. The FBI SWAT team, tactical teams, their hostage rescue team actually was, their HRT was in the building. It was the FBI HRT medics that were working on Ashley Babbitt when I walked past her at the south exit of the building.
So one of the big questions I have is who are the leaders of this violence? I mean, if they had these confidential human sources, were they led to believe that it was going to be MAGA supporters, Trump supporters, who were really going to be the rabble-rousers on that day? Or was it they themselves that were going to be the rabble-rousers on that day? It's kind of hard to parse that out here in this report. What do you make of that part of it?
The report's not going to lead us in any, clear direction in that way. I am absolutely convinced, at the very least, that January 6th was allowed to happen. Look, even if we're talking about MAGA, even if we're talking about the right had never had an explosion in violence like we had seen from the left in 2020. The Summer of Love, the post-George Floyd riots where they were burning cities down. Then those riots continued on throughout the year. We had never seen riots coming from the right like happened on the inauguration evening of 2017 when Trump was inaugurated the first time. And they were attacking federal officers by the hundreds, and hundreds of people were arrested for violence against federal law enforcement officers. We'd never seen that kind of activity from the right before. But this was dry tinder for MAGA. They had been, this crowd, so many of these people had been put out of work because of COVID protocols, lockdowns, things of that nature. They had a contested or what they believed was a stolen election. And so it was dry tinder for it to be taken advantage of by the right kind of provocateurs. And by the way, anybody that knows anything about color revolution, anybody that knows anything about our own intelligence community, our own very elite special forces, know that we provoke and we do these kinds of things overseas for God and country all the time. I had a 3-star general in the course of my investigations, and we're going to be doing a very large story about this coming up soon. I had a 3-star general, former second in command of SOCOM, who said, I would only need about 4 or 5 of my best guys to make January 6th happen.
4 or 5 of his best guys to make that happen. Yeah, that's how color revolutions happen. That's why they're so effective. You need 4, 5, 6 people in a crowd to say, let's go to the Capitol. Let's smash the windows. Let's attack the police. Let's move it, to incite this kind of violence. Unbelievable. Thanks to Steve Baker there from The Blaze for joining us. We're going to have a deeper dive conversation with Steve here on the channel. We hope you will follow that, because it's really remarkable, his story about being then arrested, he himself arrested by the FBI 2 years after that incident, and just the horrible situation that they put him through as a result of doing journalism. So yeah, join us for that. Hey, coming up here on the show, we're going to be talking about Germany falling apart, and this was foretold. You know, it turns out when the United States blows up your pipeline and then you shut off all of your nuclear power plants and you basically deindustrialize your country.
You send all your money to foreign wars,
to
it's
Ukraine,
not overseas to them.
Yeah, that's going to happen. That your country is going to collapse. Europe is collapsing as we speak, and Germany at the heart of this collapse. We're going to speak to our good old friend Ralph Schulhammer about the collapse in just a second.
But first, we want to tell you that Redacted is brought to you by Ledger, because in today's world, it's more important than ever to take control of your digital security and financial freedom. And that's where Ledger comes in. Ledger's new devices, both the Star Stacks and the Ledger Flex, make it incredibly easy and secure to take control of your digital assets. Ledger's intuitive interface makes it easy for anyone to take control of their crypto, regardless of their experience level. And I like the idea of having a crypto wallet, because as a spouse, it's mostly Clayton who does our crypto investing. But if something were to happen to him, God forbid, it would have to be somewhere that I can get to, because if it's passwords or things like that I don't know, that he's never written down, that money dies with him, right? So you need a backup plan for the legacy of your digital assets. So you have to have something like this. So you need to go and check out Ledger's suite of offerings at shop.ledger.com/redacted. More than just being easy to use, again, it helps you take control of your financial future, along with aligning the principles of individual freedom and self-reliance that we value. That's why crypto's doing so well right now in this climate of uncertainty. So again, go to ledger.com or shop.ledger.com/redacted. Take charge of your digital security with Ledger. One more time, that's shop.ledger.com/redacted.
Well, our next guest predicted the collapse of Germany months ago, or perhaps even over a year ago, and he was absolutely right. Now we are seeing the fruits of that, the fruits of that craziness by these green energy policies, the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline that led to the destruction of the industrial manufacturing sector inside of Germany. Now the German government is collapsing. Olaf Scholz losing a no confidence vote. Now a snap election set for February. Germany is really in deep, deep trouble. Could be the worst since World War II. Ralph Schulhammer, academic researcher, predicted all of this. And if anyone was paying attention, you could have seen the writing on the wall a long time ago. Ralph joins us now to talk what's going on here. Ralph, great to see you. Feel vindicated?
Thanks, Clay. Well, I feel a little bit like the guy who's constantly predicting rain, and then finally the streets are wet. And I have to admit, you flatter me. And of course, who am I to dispute your compliments? But I think as many of your viewers and listeners know, everybody who had eyes to see, it was clearly obvious that the German model of the last 4.5 years, and we can even go back probably to 2015, was no longer sustainable. So it didn't take, I wish I would say it took a genius to see it, but I think for both you and I, it was quite obvious that at some point the bill will come due. And I think now this is happening. The question is, with the implosion of the government, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this in greater detail in a second, the question is, are they willing to really turn the ship around, make a 180 and try something new and do the right thing? Or is it just a debate whether they're going to go over the cliff, with 100 miles per hour or just 80 miles per hour? And I'm not entirely sure what the answer to that question is.
Right. Fortunately, this has never happened to me, but, people that get, end up getting in trouble for like drunk driving or doing something incredibly stupid like that, you hope that they turn their life around and it never happens again after they spend time in prison, right? And maybe that's the case here. You hope that they learn from this, but I'm afraid that they won't. What is your sense of things? Well, first, we'll get into the pieces of what led to this collapse in a second, but are you hopeful that they'll learn from this?
Not during this election. My hopes are on the next election. The reason for this is because the leading candidate of the Conservatives, and the Conservatives are predicted to come in first quite substantially with around 30-31%. And second will be the AfD, like we talked about, the so-called Alternative für Deutschland, the alternative for Germany, quite a bit. They're probably going to get about 20% of the vote. So they would be in a wonderful position to have a real right-wing conservative coalition government. But unfortunately, the Conservatives already said that no, we cannot go into a coalition government with the far right and the extreme, all the terms we hear constantly. We heard about Meloni and Viktor Orban and Donald Trump. It's always the extreme MAGA, mega, ultra-right, and you cannot get into a coalition government with them. Unfortunately, they are the only party with whom the Conservatives could actually enact conservative policies, because what they are saying now, and their leading candidate Friedrich Merz is saying, well, it might going to be a coalition with the Social Democrats. It might going to be a coalition with the Greens. Yeah, but these both parties were part of the current failing government. So what exactly does he think? Yeah.
You're going to put the same. You're going to put the same drunk driver back in charge. Like, that's my point. How are you going to have a coalition with the same people that destroyed your country, the Green Party, and otherwise? Quite
literally. He even mentioned in an interview 2 weeks ago that it's not yet out of the question that Robert Habeck, right, the Green Minister of the Economy, who is personally responsible for some of the worst decisions in German history, and Merz said, well, I cannot rule out that he might not remain the Minister of the Economy in a new government starting next year. I mean, this is insanity, and it's the same kind of, I always call them the lukewarm right. And the thing is, you and I, we live and breathe politics. But many people in Germany, they want a course correction. So they say, okay, the left was in power. So if I want change, I just have to vote for the right, and then the right will be in power. I think what they don't know is, because they don't interact with political news all day, is that the quote-unquote so-called right is in fact just a milder version of the left. As I said before, they're on the same mistaken course. They just get there a little bit slower. You need to vote for a true alternative, and that's a little bit the problem in the parliamentary system. Although on the other hand, everybody knows the rules of the system, so that is not an excuse. At some point, the voters have to take responsibility, like they did in the United States. This is the encouraging sign from the US. Trump was elected, then he was voted out of office, or at least it appeared as if he was voted out of office in 2020. But then I think a couple of months ago, the American people really made a decision and said, no, we want something new. We want to try something different. And this is why they voted Trump back in. And you can, by the way, I don't want to switch the topic to the United States, but you can sense a business sentiment, the optimism is, I think, up by 41 percentage points. And there's a general, I hate this term because I'm not in my 20s anymore, but there seems to be a positive vibe, an optimism. You can almost sense a newfound energy in the United States, both literally in the energy sector, but also metaphorically among the population. And this will also be needed for Europe, but the people are not yet fully willing to vote for those parties who I believe could make that happen.
Yeah, it's troubling. I mean, in the United States, you're seeing, of course, President Trump announcing the massive rollback of all these regulations, which will open up manufacturing, bring business back to the United States, and really encourage, a newfound optimism in the manufacturing and industrial sector in the United States, in the mining sector, the drilling sector, oil and gas industry, the minerals sector. I mean, the United States outsourced all of this stuff, and we have no uranium production in the United States. The Biden administration and Democrats really destroyed the United States in many, many deep ways. It's not just Biden. It goes back to Obama and Clinton, of course. And so he's got a lot of work to undo all of this. And I think I'm very positive about that. I really think that Europe still has its head up its proverbial ass right now. I mean, forgive my language, but the young people in Europe, I think, are really starting to wake up. But you've got this, I think, an older class that's still getting their mainstream media digest every day from the propagandists. And I don't know that they're willing to turn a corner here. That's really, really troubling.
No, you're absolutely right. And the issue is, right, you have two entrenched layers, if you want, of an old school elite. One on the national level, right, the Olaf Scholzes, the Angela Merkels, I would also call it the Emmanuel Macrons among them. But they have an additional layer above them in form of the European Union, right, kind of this cadre of unelected bureaucrats. And that's a very, very powerful status quo elite that at whatever cost, they don't want anything to change. They want to see the car go over the cliff as long as they can remain in charge. And as you correctly pointed out, and then they also kind of unify against those who would like to do things differently, like Viktor Orban, like the AfD, like Nigel Farage in the UK, like Le Pen in France. But you have all these elements now of lawfare, right, where they kind of try to ban the AfD, to put Le Pen in jail and ban her from running for office. So it's very disturbing what's going on. Now, my hope is that these are, the last throes of a dying regime, of a dying elite. They kind of put everything they have on the table now, but in the end they will lose. But the question is it going to be quick enough, or will they drag their defeat out long enough so it's going to be too late to actually have a course correction?
I mean, how bad is it? I mean, let's just talk about some of the pieces of Germany's economy right now. It's manufacturing and deindustrialization, the energy crisis. How bad is it right now in Germany and in Europe at large?
Well, if we look at the situation in Germany, overall, I think that the question is always, could things be changed if somebody wanted it? Like, if politics would create the right conditions, could there be a German renaissance, if you want? And I think the answer is yes, because it is true, and that's a problem all over Europe, that in some of the major areas, artificial intelligence, the genetical engineering, AI, like all these kind of things. Now also car manufacturing, heavy industry, that Europe has been losing ground quite significantly. I mean, Turkey is now building more cars than France. But the question is, can that be reversed? And I think the answer is yes, because you still have many of these so-called hidden champions, like, small-sized, medium-sized enterprises that are still quite good. And many of them, like in the case of Germany, but also in the case of France, I mean, they survived 2 world wars. I mean, one could also say, okay, the Europeans have nothing new. They only have these old 19th century companies, which is true. But there is still something there you could build on for now, because these companies, as you mentioned correctly before, they are suffocated under excess regulation. They are suffocated under taxes that are just too high. They are suffocated by the fact that smart people leave Europe and unskilled labor is coming in. But these are all things you could address. So I come always back to my previous argument. As long as you have an elite that wants to maintain the failing status quo, you have a problem. And at some point, because we cannot entirely kind of free the voting population from their own responsibility, if people don't vote in substantial enough numbers for the alternative, you're not going to get an alternative. But I think there is still a chance for things to get better. That was a very long answer. I'm sorry, but I think you see my point. I'm just not entirely hopeless.
Forgetting even just World War II and the legacy there, and a lot of Europe sort of clings to the history. But there's some amazing brands that have just been devastated. Husqvarna, Volkswagen. You've had these amazing companies that have a long-standing place in the world that have now had to close up shop. You've had lay off thousands of people as a result of these policies, and these brands are known worldwide and carry incredible gravitas. If they were allowed to do their thing, people would still buy their cars. People would still buy their leaf blowers from Husqvarna and these other companies, right?
I think that's true. Of course, a little bit these companies made also mistakes because they made a bet, right? And their bet was, if we get into bed with government, we no longer have to serve the market. We no longer have to serve the customers. We just have to serve one customer that's much more easy to predict. And that's the government, that's the state. And that strategy failed. And the other problem, of course, and that we have to say, is also a mentality issue. There is this idea in Europe, right, that at the end of the day, ideally everything comes from the state, right? Your health insurance comes from the state, your pension comes from the state, and in an ideal world, your job will come from the state as well. That is a mentality issue. So what we see now, for example, happening in Argentina, and we'll see how Milei's experiment is going to work out. But to say, no, this is not how the world works. By the way, the same in the United States. This is not how the world works. At the end of the day, people must live their own lives. And there is a sense in Europe that as much as possible, and that also came from the people, it's not just the fault of the elites, that they tried to outsource as much as they could to public institutions and the state. So the reversal must happen in the realm of economics, but the reversal must also happen in the realm of culture. To say, you need to be entrepreneurial again. You need to found found companies, right? All these also in the high school and university system. You mentioned these companies that all came up in the 19th century, but there was also a time when Europe had some of the best educational institutions in the world. Right, the Germans in the 19th century had the world-leading universities when Harvard more or less was a boys' club. No offense against Harvard, but the point is that you needed these other institutions, the educational system. At the moment, these institutions are attacked sides. One is from a kind of leftist Marxist indoctrination. It's from mass migration, where you then end up with schools like in Vienna, like I'm living in, like in Vienna, where 90% of pupils don't speak German. So there's a lot that would have to be fixed, and that's my big fear. Is so much at some point that unless you really vote the quasi-revolutionary party into office, this is going to be very, very difficult.
Yeah, we lived in Portugal for a while, and it was amazing to see just the lack of entrepreneurship there. It's just not taught. It's just not part of the culture, and it's very difficult to start a business. The amount of paperwork and bureaucratic red tape to try to go through that process is just a nightmare. There's no discussion among young people about, hey, I'm going to start a business. Like, it's just not part of their young culture there. Really, and I don't know that that's the case across. I think it's probably the same across Europe. I don't hear that sort of entrepreneurial spirit. Is it?
Yeah, I mean, this is a major issue. This has always been a key problem in Europe compared to the United States, this over-excessive reliance on the government. By the way, you saw this already in 2008. That's kind of always my favorite example. In 2008, during the great financial crisis, you had people get into the streets in Europe demanding the states do more. In the United States, you had the Tea Party movement that demanded that the state does less. And I think this exactly shows you the difference. In the United States, to some extent, I think it's a little bit different in the big cities. It's a little bit different in California, I would assume. But overall, the understanding of Americans is that if there is a problem, you have to solve it yourself, or at least it should be the attitude. In Europe, the attitude is, again, not everywhere. I think Poland is slightly different. I think the Scandinavian countries are turning the ship around much more than how they're usually represented. But overall, the idea is if there's a problem, the state has to solve it. And that's, again, as I said before, this has to change. Like, governments in Europe at the high time of Europe in the 19th century were not constantly involved in people's lives, right? They were involved abroad. They did imperialism and maybe all these supposedly horrible things, but they more or less left people to their own devices, unless, like the beginning of the welfare state in Germany, they were too old. They were, they had health issues or something of that kind. What was always the idea of the welfare state? The state should help those who cannot help themselves. But if you're an able-bodied 25-year-old individual, man, you're responsible for your own decisions. And if you decide to do 20 semesters, 10 years of gender studies and lesbian dance theory, that's your choice. You cannot expect then everybody else to take care of you.
Lesbian dance studies. If my kids ever come to me and tell me that's what they're going to study at university, I'm going to ship them off to Europe. They'll fit right in. They'll fit right in. Oh, man. Well, we'll be watching what happens here after the holidays with these snap elections in Germany. And is Europe continuing to dig its own grave? It seems like that, amassing these forces right now on the Russian border, putting as many forces as they can to try to go to war with Russia right now. So they're not backing off anytime soon, it doesn't seem. They're trying to dig their own grave. Ralph, great to see you. Ralph is the host of Hammer Time. Hope you enjoy your Christmas holiday. Thank you so much for all of your analysis and insights, and thanks for being correct. You nailed this one. Thanks, Ralph.
Well, thank you so much, and also Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to you, your family, and of course all your viewers and listeners.
Thanks, buddy. Always great to see you, Ralph. Appreciate it. And thanks to all of you for watching us here on this Wednesday. Great to see all of you. Thank you for subscribing. It's so important that you do that because I know YouTube unsubscribes people monthly. So if you find yourself, you're like, wait a second, why am I unsubscribed? Because YouTube likes to go and do that. Rumble doesn't do that. They're a free speech platform. You can also subscribe to us here on X as well. We stream on all those platforms. So thank you so much. And to all of our viewers on Beck TV that are watching us as well, thank you so much. I should mention we have the Redacted store. It's perfect time for the holidays to grab some last minute items, mugs, hoodies, any of our shirts. You can get the End the Fed t-shirt, our new conspiracy theorist, scratched out conspiracy knower t-shirts are there as well. David was saying he was at the store the other day and he ran ran into someone who had one of our T-shirts on and asked him to sign it for him, and that's amazing. So yeah, please grab anything you want at the redactedstore.com, and we don't mark the prices up at all. We try to keep them just a little bit above what the printing costs are. So, it's just a way for you to support independent journalism and keep the lights on here in our studio. We appreciate it. So again, redactedstore.com. Okay, man, we're getting close to Christmas, aren't we? We'll be back tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern time, streaming live for you. We've got a lot of big guests lined up for you tomorrow on the show. And we can't wait to see you guys tomorrow. So have a great night, everyone.